You're listening to ThunderQuack Podcast Network.
Hello there, and welcome back to Force Perspectives. I am your host, Michael Cohen, and joining me, as always, my very young apprentice, Joe Hogan.
I feel like we were just doing this.
You know, it's an odd feeling. We on the last episode, we ranked a whole bunch of lightsaber duels from the live action television series. And we're going to finish ranking all of those. We did all of the Mando and Ahsoka stuff. And now we're coming back in and we're doing all of Obi-Wan and Acolyte.
Mike, are you wearing the exact same clothes from last week? It's kind of gross, dude.
Yeah, it's such a coincidence. It's almost as if we're recording this immediately after the other one.
That doesn't sound right. I don't
and just delaying when we put it out. But I don't know why we would do that. Listen, we got a lot of stuff to rank. So I know that huge news just dropped. We're not going to talk about it in this episode. No, we have no idea, right? Because first off, we realized at the end of the last episode that the news that dropped the morning that we're recording both of these about Skeleton Crew, it will be a week old by the time that the general audience gets to hear that. If you're on Patreon, you'll have heard it the day that news came out. But now we'll be even further removed. So if anything has happened within the last 2 weeks since July 31st, whoops. So, hopefully, actually, at the point that this episode goes out to the general public, D23 will have happened. So,
no.
No. Yeah. So the Skeleton Crew trailer was great. Everybody loves it. Can't wait for that show. The sneak peek at Ahsoka season 2, really exciting, and I'm so glad that the Acolyte got renewed for a second season.
Really was not expecting Tales of the Jawas, though. That was the big surprise.
That's a surprise. Yeah, as far as the next animated projects were related, Tales of the Jawas we did not have on our bingo card, but we'll see. I think Pelimoto is going to play a really big role in that.
Great. Dating the Jawas.
Yeah, and so I'm excited. I'm excited for that. You know what? Now that we've put that out into the universe, I'm upset that it's not real. We should just make it real. It's like I said when I did the ridiculous cover art for this podcast. Don't let your stupid ideas be ideas. You got to make them a stupid reality. We'll do that on a future episode. Tales of the Jawas. Right now we gotta really sort this out. Listen, the last episode was not anticipated to go an hour and 44 minutes. Recording time, I don't know what the final episode edited ended up being, but we did record for an hour and 44 minutes. But we got to get into this. We have no time to waste, Joseph.
None.
So let's get into it, starting with, man, I mean, we're starting strong. We're starting real strong.
I hate this duel.
But it's Obi-Wan versus Vader on Mapuzo. Yeah. Listen, this one's tough. Choreography, intentionally bad, right? So we have to, in terms of cool factor, it sucks that Obi-Wan is in the state that he's in, right? But in terms of story and then the way that the choreography serves that story, very strong, right? In terms of ranking it against other lightsaber duels, womp womp, right?
Yeah.
I love the way that this fight ends. and to me it's like the as the counterpoint to the duel on Mustafar, or maybe not even the counterpoint, but as like sort of the, let's call it like the fulcrum on which that fight and the big battle at the end of this series, at the end of season 1 of Obi-Wan. Hopefully we'll get season 2 of, man, that was a big surprise at D23 as well, announcing season 2 of Obi-Wan, and season 3. I can't believe it that they've committed to 5 seasons of Obi-Wan Kenobi. And I'll let you guys know, yes, I will be writing all 4 new seasons, just as we're making up our own wish fulfillment here. You guys know I have lots of ideas for additional seasons of Obi-Wan Kenobi. But yeah, I at the end of this first season, we obviously are going to get the big battle, and we'll talk about that. But this one, the when Anakin spills out the rocks or whatever, the essentially coal, right, and then lights it on fire, and then just literally rakes Obi-Wan across the coals. I wasn't expecting the series to go that dark with it. Like that is one of those moments where it's like Vader is the prequels really did a lot to soften the character of Vader, I think. And I mean, I think Return of the Jedi did a lot to soften the character of Vader and really like recontextualize Anakin Skywalker. But then obviously, you know, going through the prequels and the Clone Wars, we get a wildly different perspective on that character. And then the first time that we see him on screen again, I guess, you know, aside from his wonderful dad jokes in Rogue One, but confronting Obi-Wan, I think that we all expected Vader to be full of more rage and to be intent on killing Obi-Wan. But instead what we get is this version of Vader who is really keen on just making him suffer. And yeah, dude, that for me, I love that component of this part of the story. So I really like, in terms of like character and all that, it's fantastic. In terms of Duel, yeah, it's gonna rank low, but where's it gonna go on the list? Should we recap the list really quick, since it's been a week?
Sure.
Okay, so
Yeah.
just to recap, I'll start at the bottom of the list. Actually, you know what? Let's do it in opposite order. Order, because I think we're going to be discussing the bottom of the list and not the top with this one. So starting at number 1, we've got Ahsoka versus Baylan on Cetos. After that, Ahsoka versus Morgan Elsbeth on Corvus. Ahsoka versus Anakin in the World Between Worlds. Luke versus the Dark Troopers at the end of season 2 of Mandalorian. Mando versus Paz Vizsla from Book of Boba Fett. Sabine versus Shin on Cetos, the rematch. Bo-Katan versus Gideon from the season 3 finale of The Mandalorian. I lost my place. Ahsoka versus Morgan Elsbeth on Peridia. Ahsoka versus Baylan on Peridia. That's the rematch between them. Mando versus Gideon from season 2 of Mandalorian. Mando versus the Dark Trooper from that same episode. And then Ahsoka versus Merrick on Cetos, and closing out the bottom 2, Sabine versus Shin on Lothal, and Mando versus the Praetorians from season 3 of The Mandalorian. So that's the bottom of our list. Like Obi-Wan versus Vader on Mapuzo, I put it above Ahsoka versus Merrick. I know that that's got some cool choreography. It's a cool looking fight stylistically, but there's not a lot story-wise going on there. Whereas this is like pretty important to Star Wars as a whole. Let me frame it this way. I think that of all of the shows that have come out so far, and I am doing my best to put my personal bias towards Obi-Wan on the side of this. Quite literally, though, I think that in terms of like recontextualizing the main Star Wars saga, in particular the original trilogy, the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, is the most important story that we've gotten so far. These other stories are great. They're really cool. And I like the Acolyte, I love to pieces, and I think it's the best story that we've gotten so far. I do think it's the best series, but like overall, but for me, I see the the confrontation between Obi-Wan and Vader, both of those confrontations are hugely important to those characters' journeys, and those are two of the most central characters in the entire saga, right? I mean, Anakin Vader is the most central character in the entire saga, so the importance of it to his story can't be discounted, and the importance of it to Obi-Wan's story can't be discounted, especially when you bring Leia into the whole thing. Like, it is impossible to watch A New Hope in the same way after this show, right? Both Anakin and Obi-Wan confronting, like Vader and Obi-Wan fighting on the Death Star, what that fight means in recontextualized with all of this, but then Leia going to Obi-Wan for help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope, it's always been important, but it's always been kind of a catchphrase. And now when I hear help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope, there is an entire adventure that goes behind that. And so I look at Obi-Wan and I go like, that is more impactful to the larger story of Star Wars. I because it even stretches into the sequel trilogy with Ben Solo. It's like, that's why he's named Ben Solo, right? And obviously that was retroactive, but that is the truth of it, right? Like, that it doesn't matter what factually came first and what's a retcon. The truth of the situation is that the experiences from this series, what happens to Obi-Wan, his journey and his impression on Leia, reverberates 30 years into the future to the like the birth of Ben Solo, and then that reverberates even further into the sequel trilogy and all of that, right? So yeah, I like, that's something that I actually had been thinking about a couple of days ago, and was like, I wonder when I'll get to bring this up on a podcast, but there it is. So for me, the story points that are in the fights with Obi-Wan and Vader in this series, I think are so important to the story of Star Wars. So I think it gives it a lot of points. But you are here to counter that argument if you so choose.
Listen, I fully own that for this particular fight, I have some very big feelings. And they are big feelings that do get in the way of my objectivity. So I'm gonna defer to you. I'm not going to try to change your mind, but like, man, a lot of stuff really doesn't work for me in this fight. And I get it. Like, I understand why the choices are made. I just don't like a lot of them. I just don't like a lot of the choices that were made for this fight. I don't like that the fight starts with Obi-Wan Kenobi running away. I understand why. I don't like it. I don't like the way the duel ends, because to me, it doesn't, like, okay. To me, a duel's not over until one person dies, passes out, or leaves, right? And the way Obi-Wan leaves makes no sense to me. He's held over the fire by Vader and the Force. Okay, cool, scary, terrifying. Held down, getting whatever burns, even though it doesn't really get any burns. I don't even remember. Okay, Vader's toying with him. Cool. Force pushes him a few feet back, and the flames go out. And then the other lady shoots some combustible thing nearby. The exact same flames come back, and all of a sudden, Vader can't reach Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan gets away because the droid picks him up and walks away. That's really lame. Like, it's just lame. It's really lame. I get it. He needs to get away. Something needs to be happening. Like, whatever. but it only happens because the story needs it to happen. And it just wasn't very satisfying for me. The choreography wasn't satisfying. Obi-Wan kind of being a coward. I know he's not, but kind of is, because he lost his mojo. Like, I get it. I get he lost his mojo. He can't go up against him. He's terrified, and like, it's supposed to be the first time he sees Vader, and it's this like terrifying, paralyzing thing. Like, I really, really understand, but I also really hate it. Like, I hate this fight so much.
Yeah,
I love just before it happens. I think the tension of like Vader killing an entire family is like, whoa, dark, to draw him out. Like, everything leading up to it is great, and then as soon as it starts, I'm just like, wah, wah. I feel about this the way you felt about Morgan on Peridia.
Yeah, I feel you. The ending is definitely one of those things. There's a couple of moments like that in Obi-Wan that are a little bit like, okay, like, you know, I think you guys could have workshopped that one a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of like the Obi-Wan like running from Vader and all of that, it's funny. I actually was literally like thinking about this the other day, like really contemplating it. And I think a lot of it was because of the Acolyte and because of you know, sort of like the recontextualization of the dark side and what it means to fall to the dark side or succumb to the dark side. And I was thinking about Obi-Wan as a character in this story, and I want to put forward into the conversation, and this is probably like a conversation for a different episode where we can go deeper into this, but I just want to put the idea out there for people to start thinking about. What is the definition of a fallen Jedi? What is the definition of falling to the dark side?
Mm-hmm.
And if we look at the criteria of what that means, obviously Obi-Wan is not on the path to becoming a Sith or a Dark Jedi, but where we meet him at the beginning of Obi-Wan, has he succumbed to the dark side of the Force? I think that he has. And so I'll tell you the reason why I'm on this path has a lot to do with Soul in Acolyte. So if you haven't watched all of Acolyte yet, first of all, we're going to talk about all of the duels later in this episode. So like, go watch the rest of Acolyte before you finish this episode. Stop right now, because I'm going to talk about spoiler stuff for Acolyte. I believe that there are a couple of moments in Acolyte, in that story, in Soul's journey, where he does give in to the dark side. And I think right before he dies, he gives into the dark side. And it's like, because he's professing his selfishness, right? And there's an aspect of that where, you know, like Chimere had said to him previously, you know, I've accepted my darkness. What have you done with yours? Right. Mm. And I think like that moment, he's not quite accepted it, because he's still fighting them. He's still, I did what I thought, I was protecting you. I did what I thought was right, and all of that. But I was just thinking about that moment and that character and how I feel about him in relation to the larger story of the galaxy and the Jedi. And then thinking about that in relation to Obi-Wan, because everything comes back to Obi-Wan for me. So I have to relate it back to that. But then I was thinking about Obi-Wan at the beginning of the Obi-Wan series, and specifically at the beginning of this fight. And he may not have gone all the way down the path, right? And that's actually the point of the story. It's the whole point of the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, is that he has a single-minded focus. And that single-minded focus is correcting his failure. The way that manifests is I must watch over the child. I must watch over Luke. He's our only hope, right? So much so that he's forsaken Leia at the beginning of the story. He's completely put her out of his mind. He's not even thinking about her as a potential savior of the galaxy. right? That option has not even occurred to him. And then the first time Bail comes to him, he's like, I can't do it. I got to stay here. I have to watch over this one. It's your job to watch over the other one. I can't do that. To which Bail is like, then you're not the Obi-Wan Kenobi that I knew, right? And I look at that now with the context of Soul's journey in Acolyte and what it means to give in to the dark side. And I fully believe that Obi-Wan is on the path. He has given into the dark side post Revenge of the Sith. Not immediately, right? We end that story with hope. Oh, I'll take him to his family. I'll watch over him. And when the time comes, I'll train him, right? But then that hope turns into resolve, but that resolve turns into despair somehow, right? And there are intervening stories that we don't have.
Fear.
Well, that's exactly it. And that's what I'm getting to, right? That despair is fear, right? The fear is that something will happen to Luke. The fear is that they won't defeat the Emperor. The fear ultimately is that he will have to confront Vader. That's the fear, right? And the thing that pulls him out of that is Leia. She is the one who rescues Obi-Wan Kenobi. If that story doesn't happen, I don't know what happens to Obi-Wan. I don't know, because if we follow him along the path that he's on at the beginning of that story, cutting up, giant sand ray and all of that, and Owen, tossing the toy back at him and all of that, he's not the Jedi he needs to be in order to train Luke. Even the brief training that they have, right? He is not the man that he needs to be when Luke comes to him. Well, I mean, when he finds Luke in the Jundland Waste, right? Like the story can't happen if none of that happens. So the Jedi that Luke would have encountered would have been, I mean, like, does Leia even go to him? Does Luke even enter the story?
Yeah.
Does any of it happen if none of this happens? Right? That to me is like I look at the Obi-Wan Kenobi series now with that context, and I look at Obi-Wan's journey and I go like, I think that by the time that we hit like 0 BBY, right? Obi-Wan is gone. Obi-Wan's lost. And who's Obi-Wan's foil in the story? Do you know what I'm getting at here? Before I say it,
who's Obi-Wan's foil?
Yeah, like who's his mirror character in the story?
Like his rival? It's Vader. Is that what you're getting at?
No, it's not Vader. It's not Vader. Like that's the thing. Is like that's
this story or
in the overall story of Star Wars. In the overall story of Star Wars, who is the character? Because Vader is his nemesis, which is different. That's different from being a foil, right? Vader is the antagonist. He's the thing that Obi-Wan has to confront and fight, right? But who is the character that holds up the mirror to Obi-Wan from the Clone Wars forward? He wasn't originally intended this way, but when they brought him back,
is it Owen?
It's Darth Maul, right? Like,
oh, Maul, okay.
And what happens to Maul? Maul has a purpose, but then like his purpose is taken away from him, and he goes into seclusion, and he goes mad, right? Like he goes insane multiple times throughout the story. Because when we catch up with him in Star Wars Rebels, that dude's he's nuts. He's like, he's been by himself on Dathomir. He is single-mindedly focused on Kenobi, right? Obi-Wan is similarly in seclusion, single-mindedly focused on Luke. He is selfish. He is not helping the people of Tatooine, right? That's why I think that we need more stories of Obi-Wan between season 1 of Obi-Wan and Star Wars Rebels, where we see him again in Star Wars Rebels right before A New Hope, right? Because we got to bridge that gap. There are more stories to tell there, and it's like when he goes back, does he take the same stance of like just standing by, letting the guy walk all over, like the other guy is like, but last week it was more, right? And you got something to say, and he does nothing. Like, that's where I look at that Obi-Wan. That Obi-Wan is in the dark side. He hasn't embraced the dark side. That's a different thing, right? That's what we see with Anakin. That's what we see with Osha, right? Like, those are moments of like I have not just given myself over to it, but I welcome it. I'm bringing it into me, right? Obi-Wan is still he, he hasn't embraced the dark side, but he's also not fighting it at that point in the story, right? So he is subject to fear, and so Vader confronts him on Mapuzo, and he runs away because he's not Obi-Wan Kenobi. He is not, the negotiator, right? That's who we last saw in the story chronologically, was the negotiator, and he's not that dude anymore, right? Like, he is utterly broken, and the dark side is in control of his actions. And it's only, after he goes into the tank and comes out of it and rescues Leia, that he's reborn, and Obi-Wan Kenobi comes back in the fortress, right, when he ignites his lightsaber and all of that. So yeah, like, and all of that is tied into this story for me, and so, like, I really love the story components of him being a coward at the beginning of it, because it has impact and it holds weight. I think it does that for you as well, but I think that this is a lot like the Luke stuff in The Last Jedi. I don't know. Like, you and I, we have work to do. we have, as your Star Wars therapist, we have some work to do on unpacking that stuff and figuring out why you have such a hard time seeing your heroes in this light. And then on the flip side of that, why I actually, like, get a lot of I'm not even kidding. This isn't ironic. I get joy out of it. Right. Like, I watch these shows and I watch The Last Jedi, and I see this stuff, and I'm like, yeah. Give me more of this. What's going on with these middle-aged men and their dark journeys? Cause I need it. There's something in it that feeds me spiritually, right? So we'll get there. Like, I think that we can dig deeper into this. I've only scratched the surface of this in the last, like, couple of weeks, literally. Like, this is a revelation that's been brought on because of the Acolyte, and so I'm kind of at a point where I'm like, should I go back and rewatch Obi-Wan? Because I think that I might pull some new stuff out of it, with the context of the Acolyte. Because, man, and this is what I always say: the best Star Wars makes other Star Wars better. We got the Acolyte. This is compounding interest, you guys. We've got the Acolyte being so good that it's recontextualizing Obi-Wan Kenobi's journey, his entire story for me. And it's now making the Obi-Wan Kenobi series even better to me than I already thought that it was. And the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, by virtue of that, is now making the rest of Star Wars so much better, even though it already was, right? Like, it's just like, that's when it's like, just I eat it up, and I need it, and I want it, it's giving me so much more of this. This is what I crave with Star Wars. All of that said, yeah, I will rank this duel below the Dark Trooper, below Ahsoka versus Merrick.
I mean, I don't.
You want to put it below Ahsoka versus
I want it last, in my opinion, but I'm.
Oh, you want it in last place.
I don't need it to. I don't need it to be in last place, but for me, it is. I know that it's last place.
I give it to you. I concede it. I concede it to you.
All right.
It's in last place.
All right. Okay.
You know why? It's a place of distinction. Okay. It's one thing to. It's like getting gold, silver, bronze. You medaled. You're on the podium, right? Fourth place. That sucks. Nobody remembers who got fourth place, right? Last place. You got to the Olympics and you shit the bed. I mean, we're in the middle of the Summer Olympics right now, so it's a time limit. But you got to the Olympics and everybody else outclassed you. Everybody else outclassed you. You got to go home and you have to face that. That's the first half of a comeback story, right? Like that's
but see, I'd argue getting to the Olympics is a pretty big deal.
No, absolutely, right? But in terms of like it's like you have the story that builds you up to that point. You get to the Olympics, and then it's like, and then you get to the Olympics, but everybody else outclasses you, and then you got to go home, and your family that was cheering for you and that sacrificed for you, it's like they sacrificed for you, and this is an internal battle, right? This is an internal struggle. They sacrificed for you so that you could come in last place. That's the spark that lights the fire. That's the story of like, you got 4 years, and this is the last year, like and then after the next Olympics, you don't qualify anymore, right? Like that's a great sports movie. It's like, because I have 4 years to train, and then I'm going back and I'm winning. And then when that, even better in that story is when you then, like, they come in second place, but they've learned the lesson of like, it actually wasn't that important to get gold. What was important was that I came back and I faced it and I overcame it. And now I understand that's the value. The medal is not the value. That's the value, right? Yeah, man, what a great sports movie. You can literally pick any individual event at any Olympics, winter, summer, whatever, it doesn't matter. And like, that is the perfect 3-act structure of a luge.
I want a luge movie.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Okay. Next duel. Obi-Wan versus Anakin in the flashback on Coruscant in the Jedi Temple. This is some good shit. You can't argue with me on this one. This one's good.
Oh God, I love this one.
Yeah, okay.
If anything, my biases are projecting it towards the top this time.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, like, there, throughout every piece of new Star Wars content, it didn't matter what it was. Everybody was like, well, we want flashbacks to the Clone Wars. And it's like, guys, Boba Fett's story, I don't think that's the direction that it's going. Well, but it's what we want. We want to see Obi-Wan and Anakin in the armor. And obviously we didn't get that here. We got that in Ahsoka with Anakin in the armor, but we did get what we were looking for in terms of like, we got a flashback. We got some Anakin and Obi-Wan. This is technically not Clone Wars. This is pre-episode 2, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, like, the mullet's back, baby. The mullet and the braid and all of it's back, and it was so much joy to have these characters back in this way, specifically in the midst of this story. And I think, like, so important, everything that I just talked about Obi-Wan and the darkness of it, to be reminded of who these two men were to each other. And of who they were when they were at, I don't want to say at their best, because I think that Obi-Wan exceeds where he's at, specifically in Star Wars Rebels. I think, like, that's Obi-Wan at his absolute best. But
Anakin also grows during the Clone Wars too, so he's not quite
at his peak absolutely yet. Yeah, I think you're right. But like, sort of like I think what we considered their peak, right? Like, before we had all of that other stuff, what we considered their peak, right? So to then, like, to flip it back and forth and go, like, look how far they've both fallen in different ways, vastly different ways, but look what Palpatine has done to these two, to these perfect brothers, right? And even more than that, the beauty in this scene, in this fight, is the foreshadowing. Like, it's the way that it's foreshadowing a story that's already happened, right? We already know. And that's the thing about the prequels, is that's always how it's going to be. But it's giving us this glimpse into Anakin's anger and into his jealousy towards Obi-Wan that we didn't necessarily need. I think that we already understood that, but it just gave us more. And it gave, I think more than anything, it gave Hayden the opportunity to come back and do that again. And to show us, you know, with everything that he's learned as an actor and as a person, to bring all of that back in and then infuse that into the performance of Anakin before Attack of the Clones. What an incredible opportunity for an actor to come back and do that. And then similarly for Ewan with Obi-Wan to revisit that in juxtaposition to this other version of the character that he's playing. And then to bring it back, right? Because I think that one of the great things in this is like the way that he is joking with Anakin, the way that he is like, they're having two very different conversations in this scene, which is one of the beautiful complexities of the writing here, is that like Obi-Wan thinks that, hey, we're just palling around, like this is just a training session, right? And he's treating Anakin very much like the child that he was for most of their time together, and not recognizing the man that Anakin is becoming. Whereas Anakin is there, he's on the precipice of that, and he's desiring that. We know because he says it in the movie, right? Like we're, I presume, days away, if not like moments away from getting to the beginning of that story, and Anakin saying to Padme, it's like Obi-Wan's jealous of me. And it's like, look, he's projecting all this stuff on Obi-Wan, right? So yeah, like there's so much complexity to the storytelling in all of this, and then to cap it all off, it's just like a beautiful, exquisite prequel lightsaber fight, right? And the stakes are low. Nobody's gonna kill each other in this one. Nobody's even gonna hurt one another in this one. But the thing that makes it so poignant to me is that there is a point. We know it's not gonna happen, but Anakin doesn't know that. And there is a point in this fight where Anakin comes at Obi-Wan with everything, right? Like he comes at Obi-Wan to hurt him. And Obi-Wan, I don't think that Obi-Wan clocks it in this fight. He just finishes the fight and he goes, yeah, you've still got a lot to learn, kid. Right. Which only then goes further to building that distance between the two of them. And it, like, one of the things that it does so well for me is that it shows Obi-Wan's naivety and his when Obi-Wan talks about training Anakin later in subsequent movies, and you know, he says to Luke, he's like, I thought that I could do just as good a job as Yoda. And it was that arrogance, right? It was that conceited perspective that we see in this scene, in this fight, in the way that this goes down. That's what he was talking about. He's like, because when he looks back on it, he's going like, when did I make the mistake? Right? Like, what was the thing that I did? And I think that's why this scene is in the show, because I think that this is it. Like, I think that moment right before Attack of the Clones, that's it. Like, that's the I used Fulcrum already talking about the other fight, but that's like the pivot in their relationship. That's when it switches from, you know, the master and apprentice thing into the rivalry that it turns into. And then through the Clone Wars, they resolve that, but I think they resolve it by burying it, not by actually acknowledging it. I don't think that Anakin and Obi-Wan ever have a conversation about it. And so when bad stuff comes up to the surface, all of that just comes back for Anakin, right? Like they get so busy fighting the Clone Wars and becoming brothers and changing the nature of their relationship that Obi-Wan was just too young and inexperienced to know that he was making that mistake. And it's a mistake that cost the entire galaxy, right? So, yeah, man, that Obi-Wan show is pretty good. I think it's a pretty good show, you guys. I think there's actually a lot in there. You want to put this at the top?
I want to put it towards the top, yeah, because my favorite thing about this fight is that, I mean, it's obvious when you watch it, but like, what's probably maybe a 3-minute fight is split like and chopped up throughout the entire episode, because it's just kind of showing the chess match that's going on between the two of them. And I like that you said that you know, it kind of recenters Obi-Wan a bit, and you know, it's poignant for him, because once he kind of refocuses after the last fight and remembers what you know, is going on with Anakin, like as soon as he remembers the person Anakin is, he immediately is able to stay like one step ahead of him, in just like he's doing in the fight, right? Like he's letting Anakin kind of make his mistakes because he knows Anakin is going to make them. He's like, and you know, Anakin is so focused on the tunnel vision of victory and winning and achieving his goal that he's not paying attention to anything else. And, you know, Obi-Wan reminds him of that at the end of the fight. And Obi-Wan kind of banks on that happening again and is able to outsmart Anakin again. And as soon as Obi-Wan kind of remembers that dynamic about Anakin, that's when he's always able to stay like one step ahead of him for the rest of the series. And it's just like, this fight so wonderfully illustrates what's going on in the, you know, in real time, right? Like in the quote unquote present of the actual like events of the series. So not only was it a really smart storytelling device to kind of show how Obi-Wan, was able to get there, they also gave us exactly what we were whining for, and having Obi-Wan and Anakin back in like a flashback of the two of them. Like, what a perfect execution of giving us what we want better than how we wanted it.
Yeah.
Right? Because like so many times, like in Star Wars, fans are whining for whatever. And I am absolutely more than guilty of that. Like how many times I've said, I just want this from Star Wars. And then I get what I want. And then I move on to the next thing that I'm whining about that I want from Star Wars. But like sometimes they are so good at giving us what we don't realize we actually want. And I think this was a wonderful combination of the two. This fight's so good. The choreography is so good. The purpose of it is so good. It's awesome. It's so, dude, for me, it's top 3. I think it might be better than Ahsoka versus Baylan for me right now. I don't think it's going to stay that way because Acolyte has some insane fights. But for me, it might be number 1 right now.
Okay.
I don't know, but I'm willing to concede if it's not for you, though.
Yeah, okay, so here's the thing. We have a fight coming up at the end of this Obi-Wan conversation that I think is more important and better than this one. So, I love this scene, and I love what it does for the story. And I love the choreography of it and everything. But I think I put it in the number 2 spot. I think I put it in the number 2 spot because it is a lot. If you take the story component out of it, we're seeing a lot of what we've seen with these two, right? And obviously, like it's cool because it's like there's some foreshadowing of the fight on Mustafar, right? But yeah, I mean, like it's the fight with Baylan, Ahsoka versus Baylan, shows us new things with lightsabers that we didn't expect, right? Like it expanded the lore of lightsaber style and fighting for me, right? Like it really opened that up, and it's a definitive performance from one of the characters, right? And I think it'll always be that way. So for me, it's like that beats it out, because as much as I really love this scene, I don't think that this is definitive for Obi-Wan and Anakin. Okay. I think that there are a bunch of other moments between these two characters that outclass this one by a long shot. I think it's really great in the context of the story, but in terms of like, if I think about Obi-Wan and Anakin fighting, there are other fights. There are definitely other fights that I'm going to put over this one. Yeah, okay. It's funny. The two of them fight each other so often that we could literally just rank their fights and that would be an episode. Okay, so yeah, I'll put it in number 2. We go with that?
Yeah, that's cool.
Okay, cool. Riva versus Vader on Jabim. Jabim, Jabayim.
I want to put that into like Microsoft Sam text to speech and see how it comes out.
Okay. Pretty rad. This is
I really like this for just choreography reasons.
Yeah.
This fight's awesome.
That's what I was gonna say. Like this one is up with like Ahsoka versus Morgan Elsbeth on Corvus. I think.
Yeah,
like
it's good, man.
It's
really
good.
Good.
Right there because like it also like contextually with the story. It's like Vader is peak Vader, right? Which is great and exciting. We get to see him in action against someone who's like absolutely going for it and prepared to kill him.
Yeah.
And he just trounces her.
Yep.
Like, I'm sorry, Reva. I love this character. I don't want none of this is disrespect to the character of Reva. She is so far out of her league in this fight. And the great thing is that the story has not told us that until this moment.
Mm-hmm.
The story has actually been telling us that Reva is very dangerous, right? And that we should be very scared of Reva. All to build us up to this point so that we can have this turnabout, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which I think is one of the smartest things that they do in this story. So we build Reva up. She's the antagonist. She's the bad guy, right? And then we get to this moment. We've had the great scene right before it where they're talking through the door, right? Where Obi-Wan and Reva are having the conversation, and Obi-Wan's like, we could flip this. Like you want to defeat him, we could do it together. Right? So there's a reversal of the usual like Sith offer to fall to the dark side. He's like, come back. And she almost does, but then she's like, nah, I'm gonna handle it myself. I can handle it myself. And she's thinking meanwhile in her head's like, I dealt with the Grand Inquisitor, right? But then we get the reveal after this fight. It's like, no, you didn't. And I love that. I love all of that. But yeah, the choreography in this one, I mean, like the way that Vader doesn't even use his lightsaber to stop her at a certain point. I mean, like this is taking Vader toying with Luke on Bespin and putting it on steroids, right? Which then goes to show us just how much he's toying with Luke on Bespin, to the extent that he's not even showing Luke his power. Like he's not even showing Luke the full extent because he doesn't need to. With Reva, she's a threat. She's an actual legitimate threat. At no point is she a threat to Vader, right? That's clear. But is she a threat to other people with lightsabers? Absolutely. She's dangerous. Dangerous enough that Vader needs to deal with her himself, right? So that to me is like it carries a lot of weight. And yeah, it's a great fight. And the choreography is just so good with the way that the sabers just switch hands and the slices and all of it. It's just so good. This is a really good duel.
It's fun. It's fun to watch Vader body someone who is really strong.
Yeah.
Right? Because like even though she's so outclassed, we still know that she's really strong.
Yeah.
So just like seeing just how much stronger Vader is just like really entertaining.
Yeah.
And like I agree, it's like it sucks that it's Reva, but like at the same time it's like it's pretty funny. Like it's pretty funny to watch him just like totally toss her around and demolish her.
Yeah, and again, like this is like absolutely no disrespect to Reva as a character, but like Vader clowns her.
Yeah.
By definition, he clowns her. He messes with her. The whole thing is a joke. Like he's
so disrespectful to her.
This is like
throwing the lightsaber on the floor.
This is the two varsity. This is the captain of the basketball team and his lackey coming up and taking away her Letterman jacket. Like that's what it is. That's what this scene is. They're like, it's like, oh, you thought you were the Grand Inquisitor? Hey, hey, we still don't have a name for this dude. He's like, hey, Grande, come here. She thinks she's the Grand Inquisitor. And then like taking the jacket back from her and giving it back to him. Like that's the scene. They take the pin back and give it. It's like, it's so mean. They're so mean. It's a Mean Girls skit. I love it. Yeah, Mean Girl Vader is gonna rank high here. I'm thinking around Luke versus Dark Troopers, but I don't know above or below.
I mean, look, I'm Luke versus Dark Troopers all day, every day. So like right under that, I'd be happy. But
yeah, okay.
If you think it's better, that's cool.
I'm good with that. But I want you to remember how generous I've been throughout this process as we go into this next fight.
Okay.
Because as far as I'm concerned, this is number 1 right now.
Wow, really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, dude.
Oh, man. I love it. This is a great fight. I really love it.
Now I have the high ground. And it's like, you have the high ground. I am the high ground. That whole component, which like nobody says that, right? But you guys know what I'm talking about. When Vader uses the Force and crushes Obi-Wan into the dirt and like destroys the terrain that they're fighting on in order to bury him, only for Obi-Wan, who has ascended, right? Like Ahsoka, right? Like he has had his death and rebirth. He is back, and he is more powerful than he's ever been. And like Obi-Wan has literally ascended into godhood in terms of like the mythology of this story, and he shows Vader that fact. So there's a point in this fight where Obi-Wan is not toying with Vader, but is absolutely holding back, to the extent that like this could have been done. It all could have ended, right? Obi-Wan could have defeated Vader in this moment. He doesn't, because the story, the plot, the existing lore dictates that he cannot. But more than that, he chooses not to, right? Like there is a choice to the Force Obi-Wan is finally back in communication with the Force, back in tune with the Force, and back on the same wavelength. He's become the Jedi that Qui-Gon believed that he would, right? When he says, I foresee you'll become a much greater Jedi than I. This is what he was foreseeing. This is what Qui-Gon saw. And I don't know that Qui-Gon saw everything that happens in between. I don't think that he did. I think he may have made some different choices if that had been the case. But when he says that, I believe that that's a literalism, right? I don't think that Qui-Gon this is not a platitude that he's giving to Obi-Wan. He's like, no, like I've contemplated this in your training and I've seen it in the Force. Like you will become an even better Jedi than I've ever been. And at that point it was like we're looking at Qui-Gon going like, this is the best Jedi, right? He's the dude. He is actually the template that the rest of them should be modeling themselves off of. But then you know, like Obi-Wan exceeds that, and he exceeds that through the course of this story, and it's shown to us visually when he ascends from the depths, right? Like Vader buries him and he comes back out and he lifts the rocks and he just pummels them, right? Like he no longer has the high ground. Obi-Wan is the high ground. And so Vader can never at this point with Obi-Wan, like I think this is all metaphorical, right? But this is the truth of it. From this point forward, Vader can never have the advantage against Obi-Wan. He will never. If we could tell 5 more stories between this and A New Hope where the two of them confront each other, and in every single one of those, Vader is at a disadvantage and Obi-Wan is in control of the situation, in complete and absolute control. And that storytelling happens through this duel, with the choreography and like the framing. I think could be better. I think like that's probably one of the things that a lot of people are reacting to, is that like I think the cinematography of it takes away from that because it's very close. We're very close in on a lot of it, and if there were a few more wides and we saw a little bit more of the choreography from a distance, I think that it might play a little bit better for the audience. For me, I love it. Like, I love how close we are in on them, because the we know regards to like martial prowess, right? Like, that these two are evenly matched, and they always will be. That's not the point of this fight, right? That was the point of the duel on Mustafar, and that's maybe what Obi-Wan thought the fight on Mapuzo would be. But Obi-Wan has now like transcended that way of thinking, and this fight is something else. This fight is not like it's funny because Dooku and Yoda, it's like they're shooting force lightning back and forth at each other, and then Dooku is like, it's obvious that we can't settle this with our knowledge of the force, but our skills with the lightsaber, as if that somehow trumps it, right? But remember that Dooku has fallen from the light. Dooku is clouded by, his judgment is clouded by the dark side. So for him to say that, it's like, what a stupid thing to say. The force is the force. But Yoda meets him, and so Yoda's vision is also clouded by the dark side. All of the Jedi are, all the Sith, they're all caught in this, in the dark side, in this fight, in this battle, right? This physical aspect. Obi-Wan's not there in this fight. Like, he's risen above that. So as they fight, the lightsaber strikes are not what's important here, right? As much as like this is a lightsaber duel ranking conversation, this is the step between Mustafar and A New Hope, and I would even put in there the duel with Maul in Star Wars Rebels.
Mm-hmm.
And those two fights, Maul on Tatooine and Vader on the Death Star, the thing that they share in common is not the choreography. It's not the moves that Obi-Wan makes. Both of those fights, it's about the moves that he doesn't, right? Like that's the message of those fights. And one, we've talked about it a little bit, I think, in relation to A New Hope and what that means in the larger context of Star Wars. And obviously, like, so much of it is the technical limitations at the time and all of that, but what that's come to mean in the story, right? And how that's been reinforced by other storytelling. When we eventually do the animated stuff, when we talk about that fight, which I've talked about ad nauseum, people are probably sick of hearing me talk about, because that is my favorite lightsaber duel, bar none, and nothing will ever exceed it. But the fight with Darth Maul on Tatooine is like, it is all like Obi-Wan and Maul fight a million fights. It's the thing in Infinity War with Doctor Strange, right? Where he goes through and he sees all the permutations. He uses the time stone. The two of them do that with each other, and where Obi-Wan wins is that Obi-Wan, in his calculations and in playing all of this out in his head, finds Maul's weakness, and it's because he's his own foil. So he's looking at himself in the mirror. And because Obi-Wan is fully realized, right, self-actualized, he's able to look at Maul and go like, I know exactly what to do to stop you. and it hurts him to do it, right? So like, but this fight between Vader and Obi-Wan is the integral step to get to that character. He has to have this fight with Vader, where he goes into it, I think, with the intent of, I'm going to fight you and I'm going to stop you. And then somewhere in the midst of this fight, I say it's when he's buried, and when he comes out of that and we see godlike force usage, right, where it's like the boundaries of the physical world mean nothing to Obi-Wan at this point. And it's like, it completely turns at that point, and he's like nothing that Vader does could possibly overtake Obi-Wan, right? I think it is in that moment, and then in seeing Anakin's face, and then the words that Anakin says to him is like, that's when he realizes, it's like, I can't defeat you. Like, that's the thing, is that like, I can put an end to you, but that's not the same thing, right? And
So
that's why he walks away.
this is going to open a can of worms now
Sure.
by me asking this question, but that's what I do best on this show. If that's the case, which I don't necessarily disagree, but I do have trouble reconciling that with the fact that a few years later, Obi-Wan says to Luke, yeah, you got to go kill your dad. Why didn't he? Why didn't he? He could do it. He could have done it twice and chose twice not to do it. Why, if he's always able to do it, why didn't he just do it?
Yeah.
And that's the thing. I don't have a problem with Obi-Wan dominating this fight, but to me, it's not necessarily that he, no matter what, will always come out on top, because why didn't he do it in A New Hope? Like, yeah, he was buying them time by fighting Vader. Why didn't he just kill Vader? Why would that be Luke's? Why should that be Luke's responsibility 2, 3, 4 years from now, whatever it was?
Because okay, this is actually you've opened the can of worms, and I will dispatch the worms very quickly.
All right.
And I don't know if you'll follow me all the way on this, but I know this to be the truth. So
okay,
that's where I'm at with this in my journey with this. Obi-Wan and Yoda both say to Luke what Luke needs to hear in those moments. Obi-Wan very much in everything that he tells Luke in like all of their interactions, it is very much about guiding Luke on a path. And I think the most important thing that you have to keep in mind is that when Luke confronts Obi-Wan about the lie, Obi-Wan does not hesitate. Mm-hmm. There is no backpedaling. There's none of what Obi-Wan says is he's not trying to save face at all with that. Luke isn't ready to learn the lessons that he needs to learn in order to fully understand why Obi-Wan said what he said and put Luke on the paths that he put him on, right? Okay. But Obi-Wan, from the moment that he becomes one with the Force, he is now one with the Force. He has knowledge of everything. He is a part of it, and he still retains his own ideologies and his own way of doing things, and so like he presents them in very Obi-Wan fashion, right? But he knows at that point where all of this leads. And when I say all of this, I mean all of it. He knows what happens in The Last Jedi. He knows what happens in Rise of Skywalker. That Obi-Wan Kenobi knows everything that happened in The Acolyte. He knows everything that will happen in the New Jedi Order, right? He knows he has full awareness because he's one with the Force. And the Force is eternal. It's Alpha and Omega. It's beginning and end. It's like the world between worlds shows us that, right? That is the Force. It knows how all of this plays out, and Obi-Wan knows how all of it plays out. Therefore, anything that Obi-Wan says or does is in service to that and is therefore above reproach. And I know that's not going to sit well with you because it seems like a cop-out.
I'm actually okay with it.
But
it makes sense.
It's both in universe, it makes sense, but also meta-narratively in the way that Star Wars stories are told out of sequence and over time, it has to be true, right? It has to be true that Obi-Wan lies to Luke in A New Hope in order to put him on the path, in order for him to train with Yoda. And then even when Luke, like, Yoda might not fully understand this because he hasn't become one with the Force yet, but maybe he and Obi-Wan are having conversations. Maybe they're communing, and maybe Qui-Gon's in on that as well, and whoever else that they chit-chat with in the Force in their meditations, right? But Obi-Wan knows, Luke, don't go. If you go, we can't come with you. We can't help you. You're on your own. Why? Because if he goes, there are 6 ways that this can go. Let's say, like, Obi-Wan's looked at it, he's like, there are 6 choices here that Luke can make, and he's made this one. And if he makes this one, then I have to do this. It's Doctor Strange giving the Time Stone to Thanos, right? Sure. Like that's what it is, and that's the way that you have to look at it now. And it's like, and the real heartbreaker on that one is that we haven't even gotten to Iron Man with the Infinity Gauntlet, right? Like we haven't in Star Wars, we haven't even gotten there yet. We thought that we thought that it was Luke throwing down the lightsaber. I won't do it. You failed, right? That's what we thought it was. But then the sequel trilogy happened and needed to break that story, and so it did. And so now we're at the point where, like, well, Luke's decision was supposed to restore balance to the galaxy, and it did for a time, and there was peace, but then it's all broken, right? So it's gonna happen. It has to happen again, and it's perpetual. It'll always keep happening, but because these stories, as long as they make money for Disney, they'll keep perpetuating this stuff. There's always a bigger fish. Yeah.
Look, it's convenient, but there's enough there that it works.
Yeah.
So I accept that answer.
It's the frustrating thing about it, and I feel it when I talk about it, is that it is inevitable and it's inarguable. So yeah, we spent a lot of time on these Obi-Wan things, and we are just about to get into the Acolyte. I gotta call an audible on this one though. Okay. We don't have time recording. We didn't know this going into this episode, guys.
Yeah.
I don't have time left to record in this episode for us to give these Acolyte fights their due time for conversation, because I think that a couple of these are going to require a very long conversation. I should have known that just the 4 from Obi-Wan would take a full hour. Because essentially, like, Ahsoka took a full hour as well, right?
Yeah.
The other 44 minutes was the Mando stuff. So I am at the point where I objectively and subjectively want to put Obi-Wan versus Vader on the unknown planet at the end of Obi-Wan Kenobi at number 1. Are you okay with that?
You've been very kind in our give and take relationship. I'm gonna give it to you. It's great. It's a great duel. I really, really, really love it. So I'm fine with it being anywhere in the top 3. Like, that's how much I like it. But I'm gonna give this one to you. I'm gonna make a suggestion to you though.
Okay.
So we've already did our lightsaber duels for live action. We're still chipping away at the TV duels. I know we've talked about doing, I don't know if you want to do one that's all the animated duels, or maybe just like Clone Wars and Rebels and Tales of the Jedi, whatever. But I think when we're done ranking each category, I think we should take the top 5 from each category and rank those against each other and do an episode on that.
Oh, absolutely.
And find the best duels, period.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really hard.
That is the end point of this entire exercise for sure. Yeah, we'll get there, and we'll have a definitive list of the best duels in the entirety of Star Wars. The tricky thing with that is that as we get closer to that eventuality, we may have to go back and revisit some of the lists that we've already done, right?
Okay.
Because we don't know what comes out between now and the time that we get to that.
Sure.
So yeah. But man, I knew that we could make a meal out of this entire conversation. I didn't realize we could actually get 3 episodes out of it, but we did, because we've gone a full hour just talking about the Obi-Wan Kenobi stuff. Yeah. And not only did we go a full hour just talking about Obi-Wan Kenobi, like those duels, man, we covered some fucking ground that I have been dying to talk about for the last like couple of months. But especially like the last couple of weeks, I didn't think about it when I was like yesterday, well, let's do our live action lightsaber stuff, because I wanted to talk about, it's funny, we're not even there yet. I want to talk about the Acolyte stuff, right? But yeah, like all of this stuff. I'm working through some stuff with Obi-Wan. I don't know if you guys could tell. But this is the nature. This is where, you know, we've had this conversation in the past where it's like, oh, we talk about Kanan, and I go like, I don't know, man, is Kanan my favorite character? I have a very, very deep connection to Kanan, I think, because of the fact that Kanan is coded as a father and Obi-Wan is not. Right, like Obi-Wan has fatherly aspects to his character, but he is not explicitly written as a father in the story. Right, he is much more an older brother.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, like he is a mentor. He is an old wizard. Like that's the archetype. You know, like he's the I mean, like he's a hermit sage wizard. He goes through a bunch of them, but I don't know that stuff well enough to be exact and precise with it. That's a job I'll leave to Marie Claire over on What the Force. But Obi-Wan fits in those things. Kanan's a very different character, where Kanan like very much fits in the archetype that a father character fits into. And so I think that like I relate more to Kanan, and that character means a great deal to me as a result. But the thing about Obi-Wan is that all roads lead back to this character for me. So Acolyte being the impeccable piece of Star Wars storytelling that it is, and I mean that in every sense of the word, it's absolutely impeccable. It's got the juices going to a degree that like it's involuntary. I don't choose this, and I don't know, is that how great Obi-Wan Kenobi is as a character, or is that my ADHD? It's probably the latter, but my brain needs to take everything from the Acolyte that was so good and so meaty and so delicious, and now apply it to Obi-Wan Kenobi as a character and find those connections. And it's happening for me like subconsciously, and then coming out in other things. Like I was doing a workout yesterday, and the Obi-Wan Kenobi theme came on. The Galactic Empire is a band that does like, they do like metal, like heavy metal remixes of Star Wars music and other stuff, other John Williams stuff as well. But that version, I have it on my workout playlist because it's rad. And it's got, you know, the right I don't know, beats per minute or whatever, BPM. Is that a music thing? Sure.
Sure.
It's the right thing for like you know, getting you hyped and getting
Tempo,
your heart rate
right?
up. Tempo, yeah. But it's good to run to, right? Like all of those, the metal versions are all really good to run to. So that came on, and as it came on, I'm like, I'm on the elliptical, and I'm doing this really hard workout, and I'm sweating, and I'm listening to the Obi-Wan music, and I was like literally having like revelations about like Soul and Obi-Wan, and I was like, man, like it was like euphoric, you know what I mean? And so I was having those moments, and then going into this conversation, I didn't put two and two together that like so much of it would end up coming out talking about the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. But that was when I had that moment, like that epiphany. I was sort of on the path towards it, but it like, and we've definitely talked about it in terms of like Leia. I know that like when Marty and I did our Obi-Wan recaps, we definitely talked about it, that like the purpose of that story was to bring Leia in as the thing that brings Obi-Wan Kenobi back from the darkness, right? And that's her role in Star Wars, and that's her role in the Force, and as a quote unquote Jedi, right? Not a trained Jedi, but what does that mean as opposed to, you know, whatever it means to be a real Jedi, which I think that Luke and Leia have from the beginning. I think that's it's an ingrained thing in certain characters. A conversation for another time. Can't get into this right now. But yeah, like, so we've talked about that, about how Leia is that impetus for Obi-Wan to become the man that he needs to be in order for Luke to end up on the path that Luke ends up on, and in order for the Emperor to be defeated and balance to come back to the galaxy. But that dark side part of it, it's like I was almost there. Like I was so close to it, in previous conversations of like it's like, oh yeah, she like pulls him out of the darkness, but I had never before, because I hadn't thought about Obi-Wan as fallible in that way until we got to Acolyte. And then throughout the course of Acolyte, I'm going like, I think Vernestra Rose has fallen to the dark side, and all the Vernestra Rose stands are like impossible, which then brought me to the conclusion of wrong. That should never, ever cross our lips. That the idea that any Jedi is above falling to the dark side.
Yeah, even Yoda has to like
exactly
deal with his dark side in those Clone Wars episodes.
And he doesn't, right? And like he fails in that, and because he fails in that, because he destroys his shadow, he doesn't accept it, he doesn't integrate with it, right? He does. The Jedi are incapable at that point in the story of accepting their dark side, because they've been taught abstinence is the only path, right? Whereas Luke,
doesn't he accept it? I thought that's how he defeats it. He like sucks it back into him.
Does he? I thought he like fights it and destroys it. But anyways,
I don't think that's correct.
Okay,
I think Yoda figures it out, but other Jedi don't.
Okay, we need to obviously revisit those episodes at some point and talk about it. I need to watch them again. I think I've only watched that storyline the one time when it like first hit Netflix.
I love that storyline. I'm a fan of it.
But like that whole idea that any Jedi is above reproach is that's the whole point of the Acolyte, is that no Jedi is above falling to the dark side. And now, like, am I right that Vernestra is the Sith Lord? I question that a lot more than I did at the beginning of the season, like coming to the end of it. I still think that there's possibility. Has she given into the dark side? 1,000% yes. Like, you cannot convince me otherwise. She is on a path towards the dark side. I don't know how far she is down that path. I think that it's very integral to the Chimere stuff, and I think that we're going to find that out when season 2 happens, because it will. #renew the Acolyte. Everybody get on social media. Every Tuesday we're doing stuff on Twitter to like push that and get it to trend. So if you're hearing this and you didn't know that, then do it. Get on Twitter on Tuesdays and just tweet anything, just a picture of a character that you like with #renew the Acolyte until they do it, which hopefully at the time that you're listening to this episode on the main feed, they have at D23. We already said that.
But, by the way, quick addendum. I pulled it on. He does pull him towards him, but doesn't suck him inside. He pulls him close, puts his hand on his dark side's face. He says, "My dark side you are, reject you I do." And then he just dissolves into fiery nothing.
Yeah, so. See, he destroys the dark. He thinks that he destroying his shadow is the way to overcome the dark side. And it's not. It's okay. Rey knows. Rey understands. Luke figured it out, but then Luke fell off of that path and went a different way because he thought that he was supposed to rebuild the Jedi. A different episode, a different conversation for a different time. Definitely when we get the first trailer for New Jedi Order, we will have these conversations.
Crazy that they announced that at D23.
Oh man, ridiculous! What a nuts week. Yeah, but that thought process in the Acolyte is definitely what has now put me onto the path with Obi-Wan of saying, like, what does it mean? What does it mean to fall to the dark side? Because I don't think it's not that I don't think it cannot be as simple as becoming a Sith, right? That is a very like myopic, immature way of looking at the Force and at the path of a Jedi and what it means to be a Jedi. And it's binary thinking, and it's very much the downfall of the Jedi Order was that type of thinking. So I look at that now and I go like what does it mean to fall to the dark side? And can you fall to the dark side without falling to the dark side in the way that we have defined it previously. And because of Leslie Headland's storytelling and because of the Acolyte, I am firmly in the camp presently. Yes, it is possible to fall to the dark side without even knowing that you've fallen to the dark side. Right? Like that's different from embracing the dark side, which is what Osha does, which is what Kymir has done, which is what Palpatine and Vader, and that's what the Sith do. Is even the Inquisitors, they embrace the dark side, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's possible to definitively, meaning like within the definition of what it is to fall to the dark side, I think it's possible to fall to the dark side while still being in the light, while still being considered a Jedi, not a fallen Jedi necessarily. But I look at Vernestra's story, I'm looking at Soul's story, and I'm looking at Obi-Wan's story, and I'm going like, that is what has happened here. Even Dooku, I think, like looking at Dooku in Tales of the Jedi, I think we can look at him partway through that and say he had already fallen before he turned his back on the Jedi Order, right? It had already happened. They just didn't realize it yet. He didn't realize it yet. Maybe Palpatine did, but the others weren't quite. The dark side clouds everything. So, awesome. That's it for this episode. We gotta wrap it up there. Thank you guys so much for listening. I can't believe that 4 duels on this list took us an hour and 20 minutes to unpack, but
I can.
there was a lot in there. I really thought we were going to get through all like that, like the rest of the list, but that's fine because it just means that we get to come back in a little bit. And for us, it'll be in 2 weeks, we'll come back and then if you're on Patreon and in next week you'll have it, but for us it's in 2 weeks. We've got a bit of a break. We're gonna come back and we're gonna finish off this list with all of the duels from the Acolyte. So make sure that you're subscribed because you don't want to miss that, because I'm gonna tell you, I think number 1 is in this list.
Safe bet.
Awesome. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you for supporting us over on Patreon, and we will catch you on the next episode. Follow Force Perspectives on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ForcePOV, and join us on Discord at thunderquack.com/Discord. Support the show by visiting us at patreon.com/thunderquack to get early access to episodes, leave a rating and review on your favorite podcast service, or buy merch at store.thunderquack.com. Force Perspectives is a part of the ThunderQuack Podcast Network.